and see if other folks join us. So good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. We've certainly received a lot of questions from folks about all the legislation that's passed and what's relevant to them as a business and where do they go and how does it all work. And so we asked the US Chamber, who's been doing these sorts of presentations throughout the country, if they would partner with us to bring forward their expertise and break things down and explain it. Definitely allow time for questions at the end. So I want to introduce Steve. Steve, let's see. There you go. You're unmuted.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
We have a couple more filtering in. And Steve, you want me to put the slides up, right?
Yes, please. I think it's a good resource. I will dive deep into certain issues and then take any questions, but the PowerPoint, I think, just gives a good overview so we can walk through that together.
All right, there we go.
All right. Well, I'm ready if you're ready.
Yes, I will let you take it from here.
All right. Well, thank you again for inviting me. As you had mentioned, I believe this is my 35th webinar this week. We've been doing it across. I run the Eastern region for the U.S. Chamber, so we have 11 states in our region. But I'm a big fan of New Hampshire. Went to college in New Hampshire, St. Anselm College. Went to grad school. Yeah, at UNH. So I got New Hampshire ties. I worked for Senator Sununu for 6 years. So I'm a big fan of New Hampshire. So I'm glad to be with everybody here this afternoon.
Excellent. So, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. Hopefully I'll be able to visit you guys soon too, but we'll see on that. Now, I don't know if I have control of this or if I just go to the next slide here. Yeah, perfect. So I wanted to focus on the CARES Act today. As you know, it was a $2 trillion package that passed about 2 weeks ago on Friday. They've been doing this in phases as this crisis got worse and worse. So phase one was about 3 weeks ago. It was about $8.3 billion, and only $7 million was for disaster relief for small businesses. So they saw that wasn't going to be enough, so they moved on to a phase two, which kind of focused on the food service industries, and that's when they came up with the paid leave and the paid medical, family medical leave requirements. And those have taken place April 1st, so you need to be aware of those. I have a very good document on the paid leave from the federal side that I will share after the presentation. I will send to you, and along with a number of resources, because now we're on to phase three, which is the CARES Act, which is this $2 trillion package. The reason why they're calling it phase three is because of the first two phases, and I think they're already starting to work on phase four, which I can touch on at the end if you'd like, of what we're hearing. Now, Congress is not in session right now, so I can only tell you what we're hearing. The president has spoken about some things, the speaker has spoken, so we could talk about that. But overall, I'm sure most of you are aware at this point, there's automatic payments to individuals, $1,200 per individual, $2,400 for joint returns, $500 per child. There's also expanded the unemployment. This is a $600 per week on top of your regular state benefit. So whatever New Hampshire is offering, you get an additional $600. However, this ends as soon as you bring back people to work. So we are already starting to hear that, people that are taking advantage of the Paycheck Protection Program, which we're going to do a deep dive on, that they wanted to recall their employees who they had to lay off a week ago. Those employees don't want to come back because with the unemployment from the state and now the additional 600, they're thinking it might be worth for them to sit at home for a while. However, if you are willing to bring them back, technically they no longer qualify for the federal unemployment. But all that is done through your state unemployment office. Next slide, please. So we kind of try to break this down. Again, this is a huge bill. That's $2 trillion. There's stuff in there for small businesses. There's stuff in there for hospitals, stuff in there for schools. So we want to break it down as easy as possible. But again, there's a lot of information out there. They are still just ironing out what the final regulations are. I'll go into detail of that when I talk about two different programs. But so for today, I want to break it down into kind of three categories: what all employers are eligible for, what larger employers and medium-sized employers are eligible for, and what the small business, self-employed, independent contractor, nonprofit community is eligible for. So we'll break those down. Specifically, I'm going to spend the majority of my time on the small businesses, but if you have any questions on the large employers, if you need more details on that, please feel free to ask at the end of the presentation. So if we go to the next slide, so for all employers, the first thing is the delay of the payroll tax. So delay of payment of the employer payroll tax is between now and 1/1/21. It actually goes back to about March 15th, I believe, is when you can start. So 50% of the payroll tax will be due on 12/31/21, and the remainder of that balance will be due on 12/31/22. However, and there's a lot of howevers in all this legislation, as you can imagine, does not apply to employers who end up getting the Paycheck Protection Program forgiven, and we're going to dive into that as well. There's also some other tax changes. These are the bullets here on that, but as with any, when you're doing your taxes, I highly recommend you meet with your tax professional. The IRS is still coming out with the guidelines for these things, so you're going to want to sit down with them to go over your individual business to make sure that you are complying. But at this time, everything is kind of delayed while they're doing that. So those are just the kind of the bullets from the legislation, but the nitty gritty, the fine print still hasn't come out yet. So we'll keep you posted on that. Next slide, please. So all employers are also eligible for this employee retention credit. Now at the U.S. Chamber, we have outstanding, we call them one-pagers, which are summaries of all these credits. Some of these one-pagers are like 3 pages, but they're really good resources. And I have a great resource, which I will be providing everybody after this employee retention credit. So here's kind of the bullets here. You can see it on the PowerPoint here. It has to do with, if you're fully or partially shut down, or you have a huge drop, a 50% drop compared to what the quarter was in 2019. So there's a formula here, how they're going to pay it out. Again, if you're using the Paycheck Protection Program, you're not eligible for that. But we have a nice printout here that I will share that will give you a little more details on this employee retention credit. Next slide, please. So for the large and mid-sized employees, now for the SBA and for this legislation, any company or nonprofit above 500 employees is considered mid-size or a larger employee. You're going to work through the Treasury Department. There's a $454 billion to the Treasury Department for loans, loan guarantees, or reserve credit facilities for these larger companies. There's also carve-outs, as you know, for the airline industry and some national security businesses. They're going to have restrictions on stock buybacks and compensation. However, and we can get into this if I don't know how many members you have that fall in this category, but the Treasury Department really hasn't provided too much additional information on this. So at the U.S. Chamber, we are watching this. We will be sending out this information. The majority of the government's focus at this point is on the small business community, which is 500 and below for this legislation here. So we will be updating this, but right now there isn't too much guidance on how exactly go through to get that $454 billion through the Treasury Department. Next slide, please. So this is where I wanted to spend the majority of my time on for the small businesses. Is the Paycheck Protection Program. Now, I'm sure you're hearing a lot of information on the Paycheck Protection Program. This is a great tool if you can utilize it correctly, because it's 100% federally guaranteed loan to small businesses who maintain their payroll during this emergency. The whole part of the CARES Act is trying to keep people at work as long as possible, trying to keep your business open as long as possible. If you have laid some people off, you can bring them back under this Paycheck Protection Program, which is also called PPP. But the really great thing about this is there's a formula, and I'll walk you through that as well. But this loan can be forgiven if you follow the equation. So this is a major program that is run through the Department of Treasury. So you're going to go on the Treasury's website to get this application, but you're going to file for the Paycheck Protection Program through your local lenders. So your local banks are the ones you're going to work with for the Paycheck Protection Program, not the Small Business Administration. They have a lot of information on this, but you want to work with your local lenders to apply for this Paycheck Protection Program. So who is eligible for this? Any small business with fewer than 500 employees. That's what a small business is called within this legislation. Any 501c3s, which is your nonprofits with fewer than 500 employees. Side note, for Nashua Chamber of Commerce is not eligible for Paycheck Protection Programs. Chambers of Commerce or 501c6s are not eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program. I will talk about another program which you are eligible in a few. Any individual who operates as a sole proprietor is eligible. Any individual who's an independent contractor is eligible. Any individual who is self-employed who regularly carries on a trade or a business is eligible. Tribal businesses are eligible, and certain veterans organizations are eligible. If you're a 501c19, you are eligible for this program. So again, you are going to go on the Treasury's website, you're going to get this application, and then you're going to go and you're going to meet with your local lender. My first recommendation is, if you already have a previous relationship with a bank in your community, go to them first, because there is such a huge influx of businesses and nonprofits applying for this. We are hearing overwhelmingly that banks are saying that they are prioritizing the people they have previous relationships with first before they are going to new businesses that they don't have accounts with before. There is nothing that says that you have to have a pre-existing relationship to get a loan through your local bank. However, because of the influx, there are so many across the country that are applying for this. They are being prioritized. So if you already have a previous relationship, we recommend you go work with them. But if you do not, you're not disqualified for that. However, they're going to need some additional information because there's other banking regulations, money laundering questions, and stuff like that that banks need to do. So if you have a previous relationship, they already have that information on file, so you can kind of move forward. What you're going to do if you're going to meet with your lender, you just have to show that because of these current economic times, you need this loan. If you use this loan towards retaining workers, retaining your payroll, or even bringing back people that you had to lay off in the last 2 weeks, you can use the money towards that. You can also use the money towards making your mortgage payments, your lease payments, and your utilities payments. You do not have to show that you went to a different place first to try to get credit. Other SBA loans, more traditional SBA loans, they require that. That is waived at this time. If you're an independent contractor, a sole proprietor, or self-employed individual, you're going to have to show some additional documentations, different forms for 1099. I have this sheet here that I'm talking about that I will be providing you, and you'll see it in the next slide. I believe it's in the next slide. Is a link to this here. This is our emergency loan for the PPP Small Business Guide Checklist. This guide has been, it does great. It's 4 pages. It's going to break down exactly who's eligible, just like I'm talking about, what lenders are looking for, what they're not looking for, which we'll touch on, how much you can borrow, and what is the formula to get to turn this loan into a grant. So I will send this in a separate email, but the link is here as well, and please use this PowerPoint. As I said, this This form has been shared over 1 million times. People like Mark Cuban have used this. Senator Marco Rubio from Florida, who is the author of this legislation, uses this as a guide to his constituents. I sent it to the Vermont State Chamber, and they showed it to the Vermont Small Business Administration District Office, and they've shared it now on their Twitter feed. So this is a really good resource. So just to touch back on what lenders will be looking for when they're not going to be looking for is the borrower. You do not have to put up a personal guarantee for this loan. No collateral is required for this loan as well. So that is important to know. The third step is how much can you borrow? Loans can be up to 2.5 times the borrower's average monthly payroll costs, not to exceed $10 million. Now I'm going to do the formula here, but this document that I'm talking about that you'll see breaks it down real easy for you. So it's how do you calculate your average monthly payroll costs? It's going to be the sum of included payroll costs, and I'll detail what's included, minus the sum of excluded payroll costs, and I'll detail what's excluded. So your payroll costs are any salary, wage, commission, or similar compensation, any payment of cash tip or the equivalent, any payment for vacation, parental, family, medical, or sick leave, any payment for the provisions of group health care benefits, including insurance premiums, any payment of retirement benefit, and any payment of state and local assessed taxes on the compensation of an employee. That is what is included in your included payroll costs. Now you have to subtract what is excluded in your payroll costs. And what is excluded is any individual salary and any of your employees who make over $100,000. The cap is $100,000. So if you have an employee that makes $125,000, that last $25,000 will not be included within this formula to see how much you can borrow. Payroll taxes, railroad retirement taxes, and income taxes are excluded in this payroll cost as well. And any compensation of employees whose principal place of residence is outside the United States are excluded as well. So again, I know that is a lot of information to throw out there, but it is a formula that you plug it in. You're going to sit with your local lenders to do that. Please use the form that it's on our website that you can do, because the best part of this Paycheck Protection Program is if you use this loan during and I'll break it down right now. If you use this loan the correct way, the loan becomes a grant. You do not have to pay it back. So that would be a huge tool for the business community. So a borrower is eligible for loan forgiveness equal to the amount the borrower spent on the following items during the 8-week period beginning on the date of the orientation of the loan. So beginning of the date that you get this loan, for the next 8 weeks, if you use it to cover your payroll costs, so you get this loan, 75% of that money has to go towards maintaining your payroll. So if you apply for this loan and you say, I had to lay off 5 people, but I'm going to bring them all back, as long as you keep them for that 8-week period, the loan will be forgiven if you use 75% of that money towards the salaries. However, we don't want to be in a situation where you bring the people back and then 3 weeks in, you say, the numbers are not working. I really can't afford to keep them. I have to lay them back off again. Unfortunately, you will have to pay back a portion of this loan because you did not keep those people on the payroll. You can use the final 25% to pay for your mortgage, to pay for your rent or your lease agreements, and to pay for your utilities. But again, the formula is, it's a detailed formula, which I will send, but just to give the big picture on it. If you get a loan and you say, I'm bringing back these 5 people, if you use that money, 75% of that loan you use to maintain your payroll, then you use the 25% to pay off your mortgage and your utilities, that loan will be forgiven. Now, again, I must stress that you need to meet with your bankers, your local lenders, because each business is different. And if you get this loan and then all of a sudden you're unable to keep your payroll, this loan is going to turn into, it will not turn into a grant. And we don't want to see businesses taking on additional debt at the worst possible time. So each individual case is different. So that's why you want to sit down with your loan to go over with your banker to go over your particular business, because we don't want to see people taking on and going into the Paycheck Protection Program, assuming it's going to be forgiven, and then they don't hit the right criteria, and all of a sudden they're hit with more debt because now they have to pay back that loan. Next slide, please. This is the checklist. I will be sending that as well, which has a lot of information. So the other program that we are, a lot of people are using, a lot of nonprofits, a lot of small businesses are using, is the Economic Injury Disaster Loans. And quick note for the Nashua Chamber, you are eligible for this. We've had a heck of a time trying to get chambers included in this. I can go into more detail offline with you if you want to talk about that. But Chambers of Commerce C6s are eligible for this. But this is more of a traditional loan. This is, you're going to work through the Small Business Administration. Whereas the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, you're going to work with your local lenders. This program that I'm speaking about now, you work through the Small Business Administration. So there's two aspects of this I want to highlight. The first is the emergency grant. It's $10,000. Now, when this originally came out, it was a $10,000 grant. As the regulations have come out, it is up to $10,000, and now it is $1,000 per employee. So if you only have 7 employees, the maximum emergency grant you can receive is $7,000 under this emergency EIDL, which is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So that's a little confusion there, because originally we thought it was at $10,000, and originally they told us they were going to get you that within 3 days of applying. The SBA has totally backed off on that. They've pulled that. We had to take that off of all of our information, because as you can see, it's still on my thing here. Originally, it was a $10,000 emergency grant within 3 days that does not need to be repaid. They have pulled the 3 days. Some chambers that we're working with, some local businesses that we're working with, it was 8 days, 9 days. Some are still waiting to hear. So unfortunately, that it's not as good as we originally thought. For the loan itself, again, this is a loan. It's for businesses with fewer than 500 employees, sole proprietors, independent contractors, and most nonprofits. The loan parameters are, the maximum you can receive is a $2 million working capital loan at a rate of 3.75% for businesses and 2.75% for nonprofits, up to a 30-year term. The payments are deferred for a year. Up to $200,000 can be approved without a personal guarantee. Approval can be based on a credit score, and no first-year tax returns are required. Again, borrowers do not have to prove they could not get credit elsewhere. A lot of SBA, regular SBA programs require that. That's waived for this. No collateral is required for loans of $25,000 or less. For loans of more than $25,000, general security interest and business assets will be used for collateral instead of real estate. And again, the borrower must allow the SBA to review your tax records if you want to do this. So I know that's a whole lot of information I just threw out there, but these are two different programs. The Paycheck Protection Program is through the Department of Treasury. You work with your local lender. There's a formula that if you do it correctly, the loan becomes a grant. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan, the maximum you can receive in a grant is $10,000, but the majority of that is a traditional loan, and you will apply through the Small Business Administration for that. If we go to the next slide. Again, from phase 2, I won't spend too much time on this. Paid sick leave And the next slide is paid medical, family medical leave. These have taken effect on April 1st, so I want to make sure that you're aware of that. I have a handout which I will send along after, which details this, because you should be already aware of this, because it did go in effect on April 1st. So let me pause there. I know that was a ton of information to throw out. Again, all the resources that I'm talking about, I'm going to send it all to you in black and white. So you have that information in front of you. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce website is a great resource. We continually update that as more information comes in. I'm sure. And then also the Department of Treasury has a great website. If you're an employer, they have a link. If you're an employee, they have a link. If you're a large business, they have a link. Nonprofit, they have a link. And they also have a frequently asked questions section, and the SBA as well.
All right, so let's see if we can get, if anyone has video, if you want to turn your video on for questions, we can come along here and put some asks out there. So thank you for that. That was super helpful.
I know it's a lot all at once, but I just try to, get as much out there, and we can do take any questions and use this as a resource as you go forward. Again, I have not applied for these loans. I'm just giving you the legislation part of it. So the information that you give to Kate and she relays to us is really important, because that's how we're hearing how these 3 days are not being, that's no longer the SBA saying they can't do it in 3 days anymore. All this information, and then we are relaying that to members of Congress who are meeting with continually, because phase 4 is coming out, and we're also trying to make a lot of administrative changes to make this better at this time, so we don't have to wait till they come back.
And we've heard a little bit of pushback on, that 500 employees isn't really small business. And so that there are larger companies that are sort of, that have been able to get funding more quickly because they have the means to do things like that. So I don't know what will happen with that in phase 4. Have you heard anything about any pushback as it relates to?
I have not. Traditionally, the SBA, Small Business Administration, uses that 500 number as a quote unquote small business. So I have not heard of them changing that yet, but I've heard that the same thing, that the majority of businesses are 1 to 10 people. I mean, there's so many of these smaller businesses, not the majority, but there's so many of these smaller businesses, and we need to keep them afloat just as much as we need to keep these larger ones afloat.
Does anyone have questions? This is a great time. Steve is a good resource. Oh, I think you're on mute. Let me unmute you. There we go. Oh, no, we still can't hear you. It's a whole new world using Zoom, and we just had a WebEx. Like, they're all so different, and trying to figure out where controls are and how they work.
I run into this. Each group has a different program, so that's why I just have you guys set it up. Let me click in.
Yeah. Matt, do you have a question? Nope, you're muted. Hold on. There you go. Now you're unmuted.
Actually, I have a question. I was responding to the host has asked you to put your video on, so I put my video on because I always do. You tell me.
And we did hear, Steve, so I had brought up the question. I had heard from a couple of folks that Wells Fargo and Bank of America had kind of said that they were out of money. Someone actually just sent me an article that said the Federal Reserve temporarily lifted the asset cap on Wells Fargo to spur emergency small business lending. So enabling them to do more, because I think people were concerned that the money for the Paycheck Protection Program was gone already.
Yes, and this was a big issue that we heard from right off the bat. So last Friday, April 1st, it went live. The regulations came in at 4:30 in the morning, and banks opened at 8. And there was a huge flood, like people went in applying for this. across the country, all businesses were doing that. We were hearing that banks were giving the priority to their previous relationships. If you had previous relationship with them, some of these community banks, their caps were hit right away because they did a number of these loans and they were capped out. They are now doing some regulatory reform to allow them to lift the caps up. Both the president and Congress have come out that they want to raise how much money is in there. They want to put some in as early as tomorrow, Thursday. So this is something that's bipartisan. They think that they could do that without coming back in. They can do almost like an amendment to raise it, and it's going to be another $300+ billion into this because we need to get the money out. So both the president has said he would like to do that, and the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader in the Senate. So that is something I think we'll see some, and it could go as live as tomorrow, Thursday, they were saying this morning.
Okay. Let me just unmute. Edward, did you have a question?
I have lots of questions. So one of them is, so I filed for the 10K the other day and have heard nothing back from it. What I'm hearing about it everything seems like pretty inconsistent, like fly by the seat of your pants kind of thing right now, which makes sense, I guess. But the Paycheck Protection Act is the thing I am wondering about. So if I apply for that, so I own a salon, right? So when we go back to work, we're going to have to be touching people or else we can't bring in money. And so, with that likely means gloves and most likely means masks, which means that we have to either make those things or get them from sources that won't sell them to us, right? So there's going to be whether or not we can actually perform our job depends on so many things that are outside of our control. That my concern is that I would get the money if that even happens. And then I would use that money. And then at some future point, if I wasn't able to continue doing, if I wasn't able to allow our employees to continue doing their jobs because of something that was outside of our control, that then becomes a loan rather than a grant. And so it seems more reasonable for me just to kind of like have nothing to do with the Paycheck Protection Act and let the cards fall where they may and just sort of hope that we can get it back together on the other side. Can you help me understand what might be flawed in my logic?
Well, I mean, I sympathize with your situation. You're the exact kind of business that is taking this major hit because it's not like tomorrow we could, say everything's open tomorrow. There's still all these things you have to. That's why you have to work with you got to work with your banker. You have to just talk about just your business because each business is going to be different because you want to make sure within that formula, that 8 weeks. So if you bring these people back and then after 3 weeks, you got to let them go again, it's not going to be forgiven because the formula will be, we're going to give you X amount of money because you said you're going to keep X amount of people on the payroll. So that is something that you are going to have to just, understand your business enough to know if this is right for you or not. Because again, you don't want to take out additional debt. And these are things that I can't answer. And I don't know who can answer, who can tell you exactly what it's going to be like when you reopen.
Right.
So it just puts everybody in a tough spot. This is just one program that they've come out with. This is the program that they are pushing. I don't think it's one size fits all at all. And, I wish I could give a clearer answer, but it's just kind of, it's all relative to your particular situation. So when you're going through the numbers with your banker and you see, okay, if I put in for this, I need to keep these people on for this amount of time. Are we going to be able to do that? And if not, if I don't think I can do that, you may not want to do that because it's going to turn into a loan.
Sure. So let's say that I can bring those people in. Let's say that I get the money and I can pay those people for 8 weeks, right? Yeah. And so, so let's say that's all fine. And at the end of that time, some of those people are still not able to do their job. And if I were to furlough them at the end of that 8 weeks, do we even know whether or not that also qualifies as a violation which would turn it into a loan as opposed to a grant.
Our reading of it is that you have to keep them for, it's during the 8-week period that, from the loan. But we're also heard, and again, I will follow up on this. We also heard you got to keep them until June 30th as well.
Okay.
So again, that might, depending on when you get it, that could be within the 8 weeks. But the 8 weeks is what the loan is going to be based on. But you also have to keep them on until June 30th as well. And we'll confirm that because that date has been fluctuating as well.
Yeah, the fluctuation makes it seem like a real high margin of error thing.
Yes, yes.
Can I just ask a quick question? When does the loan or 8-week period start? From the day you get the money, or?
Yeah. From the day of the origination of the loan. So when you get the loan, that's when the 8-week period starts. So it doesn't go
Okay.
back 8 weeks.
Okay,
It goes when you get the money.
right, okay.
So I think the distinction that she's asking about, though, Christine, correct me if I'm wrong. As of last Friday, I've been told by my bank that I'm approved for the PPP loan. Now, I haven't seen any money yet, so it may be a week or two difference between the loan origination date and the funding date. Is that what you're asking about, Christine?
Well, that certainly is a great point, because we've been working with our bankers since before the loan applications came out, got right into it. I don't personally know the status of it. I haven't gotten word that it's been approved yet. But if there is a delay between when you get approved and when you actually get the money, where does the clock start ticking?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and we'll confirm on that. Reading right from our sheet here, a borrower is eligible for the loan forgiveness equal to the amount the borrower spent on the following items for the 8-week period beginning on the date of the orientation of the loan. So we'll have to clarify if that means when you get the money or if it's when you were approved. So if you were approved last week, I don't know if that starts the clock. I'll have to follow up on that.
Oh, that would be great to get that clarification.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So many nuances. We've even heard complaints. I just heard this morning on a statewide chamber call. One of the chambers said they have a client who's like a printing company. And so right now they're really not busy. When they're going to need this money is when they can start again and they have suddenly a backlog and have to bring all of their employees back. That's when they're going to need to help with payroll. Right now, they're not able to do their work. And so, I guess the timing has been an issue for a lot of folks.
Absolutely. And it's like I said, it's not one size fits all, unfortunately. And they're still coming out with these regulations. That's what
Right.
is driving everyone crazy. It's driving us crazy just trying to keep up on this information because we want to get good information out there. It's almost where you are. It's this is not more of a Paycheck Protection Program, but for the small business side of things, it's almost what your regional SBA office thinks is, how you're either for or against. And then I'll go into another state and they're like, oh yeah, we're doing that. So it's crazy.
And there's nothing to preclude an employer from using that money to pay people to keep them actively engaged, even if you don't have ready work for them.
Correct. If you're under 500 employees, if you're above
Right.
500 employees, you have to bring them in. They got to do something.
Right.
But if you're
Right.
under 500, you can, just retain them. Yeah.
Okay.
You don't have to have, if they can't do it, like you can't, a salon can't, they can't cut hair. Can't cut
Exactly.
so.
Because that is a portion of our business as well, too. So.
And so much will be dependent too upon what happens with the May 4th date, right? Like,
Yeah.
Rumor has it that will get extended, but does it become, sort of, Edward, to your point, does it become at some point that there's no longer stay at home, but that modifications have to be made for when people are out? Yeah, we'll have to see what happens.
It'd be interesting. So we're keeping an eye on the phase 4 talks. So the first thing is right now they're going to raise the cap. They're going to raise the cap on the PPP. We think they're going to be able to do that without going back. So that won't be part of a phase 4. But with our meetings with congressional leaders across the country, we want to say, hey, this is working. Let's strengthen this. This is not working. Let's fix that. And then also we need this. So all this information that you guys are providing for your experiences, we're sharing that. And I ask you to share it with your congressional delegation as well. Because phase 4 is going to come up. It's going to come fast. You know, they were able to do it, you know, nonpartisan before. Hopefully they'll be able to do again. There's also some talk of maybe doing some infrastructure within phase 4, and then some people want that pulled out. So there's a lot of technical fights, but our focus right now, although we love infrastructure and we love that to be included, but right now is we want to make sure that the resources available for the small businesses to maintain their payrolls, to bring their payroll back, and to stay open. And, you know, people are taking massive, massive hits here. Unemployment is through the roof across the country. And so that's got to be our focus right now.
Anyone else have questions? We have shared the PDF that you referenced, but certainly if you want to send me a batch of anything that you think would be useful, Steve, I'll send it out to everybody.
Thank you. And anything we send, please share, send it out. You know, I'll send out, it's a whole bunch. There's really good resources here that break it down, and we continue to update them as well. So, you know, after a couple of days, if you want to just check on our website, US Chamber, we continue to update them as well. I know Kate's on our email list now, so when we send out updates, that's updated information. And I just wish everybody luck. I know this is a tough situation.
I'm sorry, folks. I got to step out.
Yeah.
Thank you. We appreciate it, Steve. This is, I mean, it's, I think even for you, and we have a Thursday business continuity call with greater Nashua businesses in the last, I think, 3 weeks. This might be the third, maybe this is the third week. Tomorrow, the local SBDC rep has been joining us, and I talked to her yesterday, and she said every week, people ask questions she doesn't know the answer to, and by the time the call comes around the next week, it seems like old news because she knows all those answers now, but there are new questions that she doesn't have the answers to. It's
funny that what we focused on today is a little bit different than when I focused on Monday, and then Friday was a totally different thing. And like I said, when we were going through a PowerPoint, I saw I need to take a thing out of there about the 3 days. So it's a moving target, and I wish I had all the answers, but I'm pretty sure no one has all the answers. Right. So we'll just work together and get through this together. For sure. Thank you. And for everyone joining us, we're recording this. And so it'll be a video. We're working on getting them uploaded to YouTube. So if, you know, you missed a part of it or want to share it with someone who wasn't able to join, feel free to do that. Steve, thank you again for being here. We appreciate your time. Anytime. Best of luck, guys. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.